Weeks after the tragic incident in Utah that stunned the nation and claimed the life of conservative activist Charlie Kirk, his parents finally stepped into the public eye. Their quiet appearance during a formal White House ceremony rekindled national discussion, inviting a flood of questions. Who were they? Why had they chosen silence for so long? And most importantly, what does their story reveal about the family behind one of America's most divisive public figures? What emerged from that appearance was a rare image of two people carrying private grief under a glaring public spotlight, their silence speaking far louder than any statement could have. The memorial service was held on the 21st of September, 2025, inside State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. The atmosphere was thick with sorrow, restrained yet unmistakable, illuminated by fluorescent lights and the quiet hum of cameras that never spoke. Thousands gathered to pay their respects to Charlie Kirk, activist, media personality, and founder of Turning Point USA. Among the vast crowd, two familiar yet unfamiliar faces appeared. According to reports and scattered photographs, Charlie's parents, Robert W. Kirk and Katherine Kirk, sat quietly in the back row. No camera turned in their direction. No words were spoken by them. There were no floral wreaths bearing the family's name. They arrived in silence and left in silence. And yet, that very silence drew more attention than any speech delivered that day. A moment at once deeply public and heartbreakingly private, set against a nation still unable to comprehend the full truth behind the tragedy. As the ceremony unfolded, one after another, prominent political leaders came forward to deliver eulogies. Their words blended patriotism with grief, merging national pride and personal loss into one continuous tone. Yet in the middle of this emotional outpouring, the Kirk family remained completely still. Two figures unmoved, on the periphery of the spotlight. They offered no gestures, no statements, no effort to defend or define their son's legacy. Their silence did not seem like retreat but like control, deliberate, heavy, and measured. Analysts later described the depth of symbolism in that choice. In an age where every sorrow becomes a headline and every loss a viral message, the Kirks' refusal to speak was, in itself, an act of strength. It was a quiet declaration of independence from the public narrative being constructed around their son. No interviews were granted. No statements released. They refused to become part of the political theater that surrounded the tragedy. Multiple sources reported that immediately after the service ended, while Charlie's allies and supporters spoke passionately about continuing his mission, Mr. and Mrs. Kirk left the stadium quietly. They turned down all invitations, declined all press requests, and disappeared into silence. Their absence from the second major memorial organized by Turning Point USA only deepened the intrigue. That subsequent event brought together President Donald Trump, Tucker Carlson, and many other well-known figures. It became a television spectacle, a display of loyalty to Charlie Kirk's ideology. But his parents Robert and Katherine were nowhere to be seen. There were no photographs, no acknowledgements, no trace of their attendance. That empty space, that absence, became the subject of speculation. In a sea of tributes, their silence stood out like an unspoken equation, an unknown number amid endless praise. During the memorial, a pastor who had known Charlie personally addressed the audience, recalling how he had traveled with him just a little over 2 weeks earlier in Korea, where Charlie had supported persecuted Christians. His words humanized the activist, showing him as a friend and a believer, not just a political symbol. Yet even as stories like these unfolded, the Kirk silence remained intact. Cultural and legal observers later described that restraint as consistent with their long-established pattern. A refusal to let personal pain become a tool for political debate. Beneath that quietness lay structure, discipline, and design. It was a deliberate attempt to preserve what little privacy they had left in the face of public tragedy. What the public saw that day was not two parents broken by grief, but two people holding on to the last form of power still available to them, the right to silence. In an age overwhelmed by noise, where every moment of loss becomes content and every emotion turns into spectacle, that silence spoke louder than all the eulogies combined. Behind the flame that once symbolized Charlie Kirk stood two ordinary people, Robert and Katherine Kirk. Long before headlines, before their son's name became a point of controversy on national television, they had simply been a small Midwestern family built around faith, work, and community. Their life had been modest, structured, and deeply private. Perhaps it was this foundation of humility that led them to choose dignity over display, privacy over publicity, and truth over narrative. As reporters on live coverage announced that roughly 200 to 300 attendees were still gathered, waiting by the runway to see who would arrive, the Kirks remained unacknowledged. According to local records, the family hailed from Prospect Heights, a quiet suburb northwest of Chicago. Robert W. Kirk, Charlie's father, had built his career as an architect known for his precision and care rather than fame or flamboyance. His professional legacy included several major projects, among them work on Trump Tower in New York City. Katherine Kirk, Charlie's mother, devoted her life to counseling, a profession rooted in empathy, listening, and emotional steadiness. Together, they represented a rare balance. One designed buildings of steel and glass, the other helped rebuild people from within. Friends and neighbors consistently described them as gentle, kind, and generous members of their community. People who offered help freely but never sought the limelight. There was no record of them attending political events or aligning publicly with any movement. Nor did they ever comment on the ideology their son would one day champion. Robert and Katherine were said to hold moderate views, always encouraging discussion and mutual respect. Their quiet philosophy seemed entirely at odds with the combative, media-driven environment their son would later inhabit. When Charlie was a boy, his parents' home was defined by calm routines and clear values. But as he grew older, the boundaries of that calm life began to shift. He was curious, restless, and fascinated by the energy of the world beyond Prospect Heights. He listened to conservative talk shows, drawn to the booming voices of radio personalities like Rush Limbaugh, whose certainty and conviction left an impression. What began as youthful curiosity gradually solidified into belief, and that belief became the driving force that shaped his destiny. Throughout this transformation, Robert and Katherine remained in their quiet roles, neither resisting nor intervening, simply observing from the sidelines as their son's world expanded into something far larger than the one they had built. When Charlie founded Turning Point USA and began speaking at colleges and rallies across the nation, his parents remained exactly where they had always been, behind the scenes. At first, their absence was natural, the quiet privacy of ordinary parents watching their child succeed. But over time, that absence evolved into something deeper, a defining characteristic of the Kirk family. Sociologists would later describe Robert and Katherine as the soft contrast to their son's brightness, two muted tones behind a public blaze. Their story, as it slowly emerged, suggested that long before America was divided by loud and opposing voices, there had existed a family rooted in restraint, reason, and calm, qualities now embodied in the unbroken silence that followed their greatest loss. In Prospect Heights, Illinois, the Kirk family lived an ordinary life long before their name entered public conversation. Their quiet suburb northwest of Chicago was a calm, close-knit place where neighbors greeted each other, lawns stayed trimmed, and families valued stability. Robert and Katherine Kirk raised their son, Charlie, in this modest environment built on faith, work, and community. They were not known for politics or public display but for their kindness and reliability. Friends described their home as structured but warm, a reflection of the two people who shaped it. Robert Kirk worked as a professional architect, moving between Prospect Heights and Chicago for his projects. His colleagues remembered him as precise and steady, a man who valued structure both in buildings and in life. His design work, which included contributions to major developments such as Trump Tower in New York City, reflected his belief that everything strong began with a solid foundation. Katherine, meanwhile, built her own quiet legacy as a counselor. She guided people through hardship, known for her patience and insight. Together they formed a balanced pair, one designing spaces of steel and glass, the other rebuilding lives with empathy and understanding. Charlie grew up surrounded by this harmony of order and compassion. At Wheeling High School and later at Harper College, he stood out for his curiosity and confidence. Teachers noticed how he questioned authority and engaged in debate with unusual passion. Even as a teenager, he preferred arguments to small talk, driven by a need to understand and challenge. His parents saw his curiosity as healthy but did not foresee how strongly it would later define his identity. Their values were moderate, their faith consistent, and their outlook calm. Yet their son's energy carried him towards something far louder. By his mid-teens, Charlie had begun listening to conservative radio hosts like Rush Limbaugh and Sean Hannity. The certainty in those voices appealed to him. They provided clear answers in a confusing world. What began as curiosity grew into conviction. His debates turned sharper, his tone more assertive. Katherine encouraged him to keep an open mind, to read beyond the voices he admired, while Robert quietly hoped his son's enthusiasm would balance out with time. But the momentum only grew. Local speaking opportunities led to youth conferences, then media attention. What started in a suburban living room was becoming a national movement. While Charlie's profile expanded, Robert and Katherine remained in the background. Their modest life continued much as before. Robert drew blueprints late into the evening. Katherine counseled clients and volunteered locally. They were proud of their son but wary of publicity. Neighbors noticed how they avoided political discussions, often smiling politely when asked about him. Their silence was deliberate, a way to preserve peace in a world increasingly defined by noise. As Charlie's influence spread through Turning Point USA and his political speeches filled arenas, the contrast between his parents' restraint and his intensity became striking. Their quiet values, moderation, patience, and empathy, stood opposite the sharp edges of their son's public persona. Yet they never interfered or contradicted him publicly. They maintained distance, perhaps understanding that their silence was the only way to protect both their family's dignity and their own sense of calm. In their home, life remained measured. Dinner was shared, routines continued, and the outside world was kept at bay. Friends described them as the builder and the healer. Robert constructing cities from blueprints, Katherine rebuilding people through words. Their personalities formed the unspoken framework behind their son's confidence and discipline. From his father, Charlie learned structure and focus. From his mother, he absorbed empathy and communication. But as his public career evolved, conviction began to overshadow balance. The boy who once explored ideas now used them as tools in confrontation. The Kirks' refusal to step into the public arena made them appear almost invisible amid the noise surrounding their son. They had no social media presence, no public statements, no participation in the events that defined his career. Their silence became symbolic, a quiet assertion that not every part of a public life must be public. While Charlie spoke before thousands, shouting phrases like, "How are we doing, Georgia? Who's voted already? Raise your hand," his parents likely sat together in the same calm living room, untouched by spectacle. In that image, the speaker before a crowd and the parents alone in quiet, the essence of the Kirk family was revealed. One voice pursued the world's attention, while two hearts chose peace. For Robert and Katherine, silence was not withdrawal but protection. A deliberate act of dignity in a world where everyone was expected to speak. After the tragedy that claimed Charlie Kirk's life, Robert and Katherine's long-held silence became a national point of reflection. Their quiet withdrawal from public view stood in stark contrast to the tidal wave of commentary and media coverage that followed. The political world was loud with opinions, theories, and speculation, but the Kirks themselves remained unshaken in their choice to stay unseen. Reporters searched for photographs, interviews, or even a passing statement, but none existed. Every attempt to locate them led to the same conclusion. The couple had retreated entirely from public life. To some, this appeared as avoidance. To others, it symbolized a dignity too rare in modern times: the refusal to let grief become performance. In the weeks following the memorial service at State Farm Stadium, various networks and talk shows debated the family's silence. Political commentators framed it through ideological lenses, attempting to interpret what their absence meant. Was it disapproval of their son's legacy? Was it pain too deep to express? Or was it, perhaps, The only authentic act left in a world where even mourning had become public property? Whatever the reason, their quietness spoke volumes. It was as if the very values that had defined their lives, restraint, composure, humility, had now become their shield against intrusion. For decades, Robert and Katherine Kirk had built their world around structure, order, and calm. The house in Prospect Heights, which once echoed with their son's teenage debates and restless energy, had returned to stillness. Friends and neighbors respected their privacy, often leaving small notes or flowers by the gate instead of knocking on the door. A few recalled that, before the tragedy, Robert could often be seen walking their family dog in the evenings, stopping to greet passers-by with a polite nod. After Charlie's death, those evening walks stopped. Katherine, once active in local church counseling groups, quietly withdrew from her schedule. Their routines, once steady and dependable, dissolved into the quiet rhythm of grief. Despite their silence, traces of their character remained visible through the lives they had touched. Former clients of Katherine's counseling practice spoke warmly of her compassion and wisdom. Some mentioned how her words had guided them through dark times, helping them rebuild their own lives. Robert's work, meanwhile, continued to stand visibly in the Chicago skyline. Tall buildings that quietly bore witness to his discipline and skill. These legacies, built not through words but through actions, told their story far more truthfully than any interview ever could. The public, however, was not easily satisfied. In an age where access is equated with truth, the Kirks' absence invited endless speculation. Some tabloids fabricated stories suggesting family conflict, while others portrayed them as victims of isolation. Yet, every rumor eventually met the same wall. There were no statements, no confirmations, no denials. The Kirks simply refused to engage. Their silence, once puzzling, began to earn respect. Writers and commentators slowly shifted tone, describing them as symbols of quiet strength in a noisy era. They had chosen grief over grandeur, peace over performance. At the same time, the world continued to discuss Charlie's legacy. His organization, Turning Point USA, carried on its work, hosting conferences and youth summits dedicated to his vision. His name became a rallying cry for followers and a point of debate for critics. Speeches invoked his memory as both inspiration and controversy. But his parents were never seen at these gatherings. They made no appearances, released no statements, and contributed no sound bites. To many, this absence was their final act of self-preservation, a way to separate personal loss from public identity. They had given the world their son's voice. Now, they chose to keep their own. Some accounts suggested that Charlie's childhood friends tried to reach out to the Kirks, offering condolences and seeking connection. Most received polite, brief replies, expressions of gratitude, nothing more. Katherine, known for her empathy, reportedly wrote a few thank you notes to close acquaintances, each handwritten, simple, and sincere. There were no emotional appeals, no elaborate explanations, only gratitude. This restraint reflected her lifelong belief that emotions, like words, carried power, and that not every feeling needed to be shared to be real. In the absence of public statements, people turned to the family's past to understand them. Community members remembered how Robert and Katherine had always supported local causes, charity drives, architectural conservation efforts, and mental health programs. Their generosity was quiet but consistent. One former neighbor recalled that during a particularly harsh winter, Robert had helped repair the roof of an elderly resident's home without accepting payment. "That's just who he was," the neighbor said. "He fixed things, quietly, efficiently, without fuss." Katherine, meanwhile, continued volunteering at counseling centers well into her late 50s, often mentoring younger counselors just starting their careers. These details painted a picture of two people whose values had always been rooted in action rather than expression. Years earlier, before Charlie's fame and controversy, the Kirk family had been known simply as a kind and hard-working household. Their transformation into the subject of national attention was something none of them could have anticipated. Robert's professional life had prepared him for precision, not publicity. Katherine's experience in guiding others through crisis may have helped her endure her own. Yet even her training could not have prepared her for the scale of attention that followed. Still, she remained composed, adhering to the belief that silence, when chosen deliberately, could heal more effectively than words ever could. By the end of that year, media attention began to fade. The political cycle shifted to new controversies, new stories, new debates. The Kirks were gradually left alone. Neighbors noticed their re-emergence. Robert tending to his garden again, Katherine returning occasionally to the church for quiet prayer. Their faces carried the marks of grief but also the calm acceptance of time. They had endured the unthinkable without surrendering to spectacle. To many, that quiet endurance became their legacy. In retrospect, the story of Robert and Katherine Kirk was not one of tragedy alone but of resilience. Their son's journey, his rise and fall in the public eye, was only one part of a larger picture. A family navigating the collision between private life and public scrutiny. Their silence was not emptiness. It was a form of presence, a way of honoring their son while maintaining their own humanity. While the world shouted, they chose not to add another voice to the noise. Years from now, when people look back at the life of Charlie Kirk, they may recall his fiery speeches, his political influence, or his controversial legacy. But those who look closer will find another story. The story of two parents who, amid chaos, held on to grace. They reminded the world that not every response must be loud, not every grief must be seen, and not every truth needs to be spoken aloud. Their dignity became their message, their silence their final statement. And in that silence perhaps lay the truest reflection of their love, quiet, enduring and unshaken.